This is the You Know a Trader podcast, commentary on life as it relates to the markets, finance, and the economy. Nothing within this podcast should be viewed as an investing or trading recommendation. You Know a Trader, Aileron Trading, or any other entities referenced or discussed are not registered investment advisors or should be taken as advisory services. They do not tell or suggest which securities, currencies, or derivatives should be bought or sold. Any speakers or guests of this channel may hold long or short positions within the currencies, derivatives, securities, equities, or industries herein discussed. There is a high degree of risk involved in trading. You Know a Trader, Aileron Trading, or any other entities referenced or discussed are not registered investment advisors or should be taken as advisory services. They do not tell or suggest which securities, currencies, or derivatives should be bought or sold. Any speakers or guests of this channel may hold long or short positions within the currencies, derivatives, securities, equities, or industries herein discussed. There is a high degree of risk involved in trading any financial asset. You should always check with your licensed financial advisor and tax advisor to determine the suitability of any investment. Or you should ask the firm with which you invest, trade, or deal about the specific terms, conditions, tax implications, and risks of any financial instrument and the associated obligations that such trading may place upon you. You should always check with your licensed financial advisor and tax advisor to determine the suitability of any investment. To your individual circumstances, no assumptions should be made in relation to the performance or accuracy of the method shown. No claims are made as to the success or profitability of any statements made.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to the very first You Know a Trader podcast. And it's probably best to start off this very first podcast that we have, You Know a Trader, with sort of a little bit about me, a little bit of an introduction to myself, and then what you're going to find on this podcast, and then some general beliefs. Because, you know, I have done this before, actually. I have done podcasts before for many, many years. I'm not a newbie. As a matter of fact, I have a podcast ongoing at this moment in another venue, and we'll get to that later. But I thought it best to sort of just have an introduction here in the beginning because, as they say now, podcasting is one of those things that when you put out the product, it's an evergreen product, right? In other words, someone could discover us and discover You Know a Trader 3 years from now. And it's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start over from the very beginning, and I'm going to go to podcast one, and who is this guy? So who is this guy that I'm listening to? Some of these podcasts I have found 3 years after I'm recording this are quite interesting, so let me go back to the beginning. Well, all right, let's do that. Let's talk about myself a little bit. I don't like to talk about myself, but this is a podcast, right? And people are curious. So my name is Dan. I have been trading at the time of this recording, almost 30 years. So very likely by the time you're hearing this podcast, I will have been trading for 30 years or over 30 years. Got my start in the mid-90s. I was a newlywed, and as newlyweds go, I was really hungry for a way to make some money. And so I was introduced to trading by a friend of mine, and I would love to say, hey, you know, this friend of mine, he was from Chicago and he knew some guys on the floor and he introduced me. I have no such grandiose introductions to trading. I was introduced, back then, you know, the internet was not as big or pretty much unrecognizable to the form it is today. So I was handed a book on trading commodity futures, which was long on hype and very, very short on all of the things that you actually needed to know how to trade commodity futures and exactly what you were getting yourself into. And I started and I floundered off of reading a book for many, many years. So there is no grandiose story of how I knew a clerk in Chicago or I knew somebody in New York and then they introduced me to somebody that was a local or running their own firm. Nothing like that. Right? Nothing like that. Very, very humble beginnings. A poor kid in his 20s who had just gotten married to the love of his life and desperate for a way to make money. And I did pretty much all of the wrong things. Right? So that was the mid-90s. That means I'm in my 50s now. I fumbled in trading for many, many years. And I would say right around 1998, 1999, I started to get a handle on what I was doing wrong and correct those deficiencies and really start to make some headway. But trading is a skill. Trading is really a skill. It's not a follow the roadmap or follow this system and then you just know what to do in every circumstance and boom, now you're just a trader. It's a skill that you have to pick up and master. It's like playing chess. It's like playing poker. It's like practicing jiu-jitsu. Nobody walks in and within 8 months, they're getting their purple or brown belt in jiu-jitsu. That just does not happen. So it's a skill. You have to learn it. So I got a handle on what I was doing wrong and began to correct myself. And here I am 30 years later, still a trader. Around 2007, I saw some things going massively wrong in the economy. Very, very, very concerning. And I started talking because by 2007, I had sort of gotten a handle on what I was doing wrong, and I was consistently profitable. I had different approaches to trading. We're not going to get into that, but I had different approaches to trading, and I thought, let me just start, because there's a lot of nonsense. I saw so much nonsense out there financially. I was like, let me just start talking about what actually works and what doesn't work, and we're going to get into that a lot in this podcast. And let me start journaling my efforts and doing so in a way that is sort of auditable, that ones can look and say, yeah, he actually took this trade. Yeah, he actually took that trade. Here's the entrance. Here's the exit. Here's how that's measured reasonably. This guy actually doesn't cheat. Because by 2007, I had gotten to know some guys in Chicago, right? I got my start in trading commodity futures. And boy, I tell you, Chicago changed so much over the years, and that's a tale for another podcast. But as I would call in orders, I got to know guys, right? So I'm calling in orders from a home office, and I got to know different guys on the floor. They moved to discount desks, and I got to know Scott and Mark and just a half a dozen other people at many different firms. And so I got a better handle on what was going on, and a lot of traders were talking with one another, right? I was by no means the only one in 2007 that saw, okay, things are going off the rails here. But circling back just a little bit, when it comes to getting to know some guys in Chicago, from calling in orders and having relationships with clearers in Chicago, one thing that has become very evident is how many people both cheat and present themselves fraudulently in trading in order to get people to listen to them, and how absolutely vital it was to be honest. Guys on the floor back in the day, and this is something I want to talk about more in the future. Honesty made the money sticky. So what do we mean by that? It's an expression that we have in asset management. When money is sticky, it means that the clients stay with you. Okay, so one of the major problems in asset management is you'll have investors and they want to leave at the drop of a hat, because you would think that if you're dealing with a QEP, which is a qualified eligible person or an accredited investor, and they have millions of dollars, they don't chase hot returns and don't chase hot money. I am here to tell you that is not the case. That is just not the case. Many QEPs, many accredited investors fall victim to the very same human tendencies that we all have. It's like you could be doing great, you could be doing fine, you could be kicking out wonderful returns, and instead of kicking out 3% a month, you kick out like a 0.5% or like 50 basis points, and boy, they are looking for the next hot firm that's, hey, though I heard over here they're printing tons of money, right? So they leave, and there goes some of your assets that you were trading. So what you need is for that money to be sticky. That's what we mean when we say sticky money. And one of the ways that you make sure that money is sticky in asset management is you're honest and you have integrity. So I thought back in 2007, bringing everything I said previously sort of together here a little bit, I thought in 2007, let me start something publicly, and I'm going to just sort of mark my trades and where I'm at and what's going on, what's the life of a trader, what is complete fluff nonsense that's just based on lifestyles of the rich and famous, on the Bobby and all that nonsense. Because it is nonsense. That's not trading. That's fluff. That's noise. That's lifestyle stuff that if you chase that, best of luck to you. I know many guys who have. Best of luck to you. I don't think that has anything to do with trading. but just show the reality of it, right? So I started a public presence around 2007 or so. Became very bearish on the economy during the great financial crisis. Had one of my better years. If I remember correctly, without having to look up the records, I think I did something like a 25 to 30% year, somewhere in that range during 2008. I was worried that the funds I was trading weren't going to be there when I needed them, like everyone else. The great financial crisis, it's not how well did you trade. The thing that we were all worried about is, did the financial institution from which you were trading, did they have the money, right? You've got your funds with them, and it's what we refer to as counterparty risk in the business, right? So in other words, you sit down to a poker table and everybody's playing chips. Well, you have to have some level of counterparty trust, or trust in your counterparty, that the guy placing all of these bets actually has the cash to back up the bets he's making, right? So counterparty risk and trust of your counterparties. Well, in 2008, you could have been having a fantastic year. That wasn't the question. The question was, I got my money with you guys. Are you one of the yahoos that have over-leveraged 300 to 1 and you're insolvent now and my money's just gone? So that was the problem during 2008. So anybody that's like, I traded brilliantly during 2008 and I had no worries whatsoever. I can tell you that person was either stupid and didn't really understand what was going on in 2008, or they're lying. It's just that simple. And so I built a public presence, and the YouTube channel that this particular podcast is associated with, I think at one point it may have had upwards of 60,000 subscribers. I'm not sure. I built it up. It was decent, right? I tried a couple of other educational ventures. Some with partners that were fantastic, and I love those guys, and I'm friends with those guys to this day. Others, I found out partners, how do I put this? Let me sum up all of that time period this way. I discovered that generally, people are sort of crazy. People are sort of nuts. And I found that out, let's just say partners. Let's just put it in plural in that way, because I know some people were around back then and may be trying to figure out, and I don't want to get into the drama because I don't care, right? I've moved on, and what I did is, right, I tried a couple of different ventures to sort of share what I was doing on a more structured basis. I was noticed, quite frankly, and I sort of left all of that to pursue institutional efforts. And why did I leave? Okay, so if you're up to this point, and I trust you, we're going to be wrapping this up. They are long-form podcasts, so hey, you're the one listening to this. So if you signed up for the story, you're just going to have to listen to the story. But we're sort of wrapping things up here as far as who I am and sort of my background and history. But, as I was saying, I was sort of noticed, and I was approached to pursue more institutional efforts. We'll put it that way. And one of the things that they mentioned to me was, listen, we like you. We have dug a little bit more into you, and we know that what you're saying is actually what, you say you're doing, which is unlike so many people out there. But the problem is, with this wild public presence, it's not that it's completely incompatible with trading education. And we know there are a lot of good guys out there that are in trading education. More so now here in 2024 when I am recording this, July of 2024 when I'm recording this. More so now than there was then. I tell people that I think FinTwit, or the sort of financial ecosphere on Twitter, if you get in with the right guys, it's the best iteration of FinTwit there has ever been, or FinX if we're going to call it FinX. It is by far the best that have ever been, because what's happened is all of the real professionals have sort of moved in. And some of the big names, I'll get into the reasons for anonymity later. It's very important, but it's somewhat wrapped up in what I'm talking about here. Some of the big names, you can sort of figure out who they are. It's a little difficult. I think of guys, I don't know Conks personally, but I think of guys like Conks, right? When Conks starts speaking, his level of the financial plumbing of the financial ecosphere is so deep. And some of the things he says, there were some thinking that he may be Zoltan Polzar. I think personally, I don't think he's Zoltan, but I think He works sort of in that space. Some think he worked at Citadel. I don't know. And quite frankly, it's not important, because the quality of the information that Cox puts out there in the financial ecosphere on Twitter or on X or whatever you want to call it is phenomenal. Is absolutely phenomenal. So there's Cox, right? There's a couple of other guys that have moved in. This guy, does use his name, and he worked at Salomon Brothers. Somebody else moved in. They still stay anonymous, and there's a lot of real reasons for that. But it's very, very obvious they know their way around the short-term interest rate markets as soon as they start speaking, and the value add of their information is just incredible. And what's happened is all of these guys have sort of moved into the space, and it's just drowned out the nonsense. So I say the proceeding to say that it's much, 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 much better now than it was then. But rewinding just a little bit, it was sort of explained to me. It's like, we know you're the real deal. We've looked you up. We don't care about any problems in life or any of that, but we know you actually know what you're talking about. But the problem is you're near the trading education space. And it's not that that's illegal or anything like that, but there's a couple of problems. First of all, it's viewed as sort of scummy. It's viewed as, in a way, by the general population, as that's where all the scumbags hang out. We know you're not like that. John Grady's not like that. John Grady's another one out there that's the real deal. Right, and some other guys that present legitimate information that's really, really good and may have services. But as a whole, the whole arena is viewed in this really scummy way. And the problem is if you're interacting with clients on an institutional basis, and it's like, who's this Dan guy? Oh my God, he had a trading education site? Are you kidding me? Reputational risk. So first of all, there's reputational risk. And the second problem is regulatory. So it's not that the regulators per se, there's any rule against it, but they will pick apart every single thing you say to the point that you just want to end it all because you're caught up in this regulatory, politically correct, not even politically correct. We don't mean politically correct. We mean regulatory correct language, that this could be taken that way and this could be taken that way. And it's like, it just becomes a nightmare. So we would prefer that you not have that. So I left. So that's why I left 2017, right? I'm still in the midst of institutional efforts. I'll put it that way. They're humming right along. Then how am I back? If that all the proceeding was true, well, as I was saying, it's the space has changed a lot in the last several years because now there's so many more professionals on social media. Social media has matured somewhat. I use that term very loosely, but it has matured somewhat. And it's just the caliber of the guys that are out there, and it's sort of understood that does happen. At the same time, because of my institutional efforts, I am now in a different corporate structure. So the way I am layered in that corporate structure, I won't say it offers protections. I will say it nullifies many of the concerns that were present. Okay? We'll get into a lot of this in the future and in future podcasts because I've probably learned more in the previous 7 or 8 years being around the institutional space than I could have accumulated on my own in the last, if I had 70 years to do it. So we'll get to all of that, trust me, in future podcasts. But since I did have a new corporate structure, it sort of offers and negates some of that. The arena has changed, and sort of I approached one of the companies that I'm a part of. I'm in like either a senior partner or a junior partner in like 7 different companies. And I said, hey, how about I do the public presence thing again? And it was like, go with God. Those protections are in place. Go with God. Please operate according to these rules, which I'm going to operate according to those rules. That's no problem. There's charters. There's mandates that I have to operate under. But they were like, if you do that, then go with God, and we don't have a problem with it. So here I am. That's I've been gone for 7 or 8 years, and I have to say that when I came back, I and other people who knew me, and you may hear me do little shout outs to people who knew me in the previous iteration, back from 2007 to like 2017. I was shocked as to how many people were still hanging on to the channel hoping I would come back. There's like a lot left, right? I said back in 2017, sorry guys, I got an institutional opportunity. Peace out. Love y'all, but peace out. And so a lot of people unsubscribed, and it's like cleaned up their social media follows and everything, but there's still 8,300 people that had been hanging on to the YouTube channel, and it was like, wow, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. So I came back. There's still people commenting, right? The little introduction that we have in the beginning, by the way, we are going to have that because we will touch on financial topics. I don't personally, now the way I want to do things on social media, think there needs to be an introduction or an outro. But since we're dealing with anything financial, that risk disclaimer has to be there. And I put some music to it. I put the music back from what I had in 2007. The music's from a buddy of mine, Paul. He did the drums, and he had this whole song about a friend of his that had passed away. And I got permission from him. And so, I put the drums in there. So you'll hear people say, yes, those drums are back, right? Dan's back. Well, that's what they're talking about. They're people that literally hung on for 10 years subscribed to the channel. And wow, thank you. Thank you very much. A little bit of ground rules on this particular podcast as we move forward. I've learned a lot about navigating the space of social media, both to protect myself, and I've probably grown quite a bit. I used to have a much more hot temper than I did now. Impulse control problems. I've learned to use, there's always going to be haters, there's always going to be trolls, there's always going to be people doing stupid things. I've learned not to get pulled, you can get pulled into it, but use those people. Use them, right? A friend of mine and another follower, two people said when I was talking about them about maybe coming back, they said, whatever you do, look into the algorithm. Look into how the algorithm works, what it likes to see, right? So I did that. And comments on videos and podcasts, it's very tricky, right? It's not just a yes or no answer, but the algorithm loves that sort of stuff. So as the podcast grows, as we did before, as the audience grows, I won't be able to get to everybody because I'm familiar with podcasting. I'm familiar with social media presence. I had one before. It grows to a point that you just literally cannot answer everybody. And the social media platforms just stop notifying you that even a comment was made. But before we're at that point, interact with those people. If they want to troll you, don't get mad. Use it. Comment back and forth, because generally those people have such poor emotional control, they can't stop themselves. They just got to get that word in. So comment, interact back and forth. Love their comments. Thumb up their comments. The algorithm seeing, hey, there's a ton of interaction on this video. Use them. Use it, right? So that being said, at the same time, there are some no-nos. There are levels of disrespect that can grow that are just completely unacceptable. There's no need for needless offense. Some of that I tolerate because I just don't believe in, I just don't believe in. Let people say stupid stuff because it sort of unmasks who they are for everybody else that has a reasonable brain. Right? I unbanned most people. Some I knew, you don't go around starting to attack somebody's beliefs, and then when they try to say, okay, I'll take the attack, I'll stay calm about that, let me reasonably explain this, they start going personal and then going after friends of yours and starting making wild claims about friends of yours, and then start, like, anything that gets remotely near doxing, not only will it be blocked, but it'll be reported and possibly to the police. So, and there's not a lot that can be done there on a legal law enforcement action, but at least it can be started, right? I've learned a lot too in the last 8 years about the way people think the law works and the way it actually works, and it's quite different. It's not like, oh, I'm going to get after you and I'm going to sue you. No. That's just stupid, and it's being a crybaby and all of that. But you want a record made, and if things are done, then there's a record. So that if something comes up later, there's a record, right? But regardless, just ground rules. I unbanned most folks because I want to use their lack of emotional control. I will use it to some extent in the beginning until it grows so much that I can't. anything that goes, and I think anybody that's a reasonable adult knows what's over the limits. Like when you start going crazy and getting after personal relationships and doxing and then attacking the people that may have relationships. Okay, well, yeah, action will be taken there. But past that, I don't have to worry about that stuff anymore, and nor do I care. So that's just the basic ground rules of this particular a Trader podcast. Okay, and a little bit about me and who I am and where I come from. So, what are we going to have on this podcast? You may have thought up to this point, listening to me get into the background and some ground rules, that this is a podcast that's going to be all about trading. And I'm going to explain my trading strategies, and I'm going to get into what I'm doing. And none of that is true. None of that is true. When you get into the institutional space, many times you have to sign NDAs. You have to sign non-competes, and people can say, well, that's being attacked. And I believe in NDAs and I believe in non-competes. And it's not for employee relationships working at a firm. It's when you're a partner at a firm. So you don't want somebody basically taking your approach and maybe your portfolio mandate, and then they develop a relationship with your clients and everything's buddy-buddy and everything's zooming along and they know exactly how the mandate works, and then they start painting you as a bad guy behind your back, and then they off with your clients and they open their own firm, and yeah. So there are NDAs and non-competes that I'm under that I'm just not getting into that stuff, okay? However, this is what I discovered in 2007 to 2017, the first go-round that I did this. There were people that would come along and they would sort of investigate what it is I do in trading and the rigors of trading. And after about a 2 year, sometimes less, sometimes a year and a half, sometimes 2 years, they would think, I don't think trading's for me, but I want to stay subscribed to Dan because I like hearing what he thinks about these particular topics. So they weren't necessarily coming to listen to an arbitrage strategy that I now have. Now, a few arbitrage strategies that I now have. Some complex arbitrage strategies. One arbitrage strategy you really want to stay clear of because, trust you me, nightmares can happen that are unlike anything you've imagined. Or pairs spreads. I've really gotten into spreading. And I don't mean option spreads. I mean spreading. So it's like that's not why they're listening. They're listening to how finance affects all of our lives. And many times they would say something like, I'm going to say subscribe to you because I know you're a trader. And I like the reasoned and rational and balanced way you approach topics and explain what you think. And so I'm going to say subscribe because that's what I want to hear. And that's what you're going to find here in a Trader. Because what they would say is, hey, I know a trader. I know this Dan guy. I'm going to go listen to him. I know this is all over the news. Let me go listen to this Dan guy and see what he thinks about it. And that is really what you're going to find in this podcast. I used to have a byline that I would use, right? Reason, rationality, balance. Some folks know me from my real life, knew me in real life, and they would say, hey, you know what? I actually like listening to you because you don't present an agenda per se, but you do let us know what you're thinking. I retweeted something recently. I have another venture. We'll get to that here in a second. But I retweeted something recently by Dirty Texas Hedge. I love Texans to death. I've never lived in Texas. I have no relatives in Texas. I'm not from Texas, but dear Lord in heaven, I love Texans to death. But he was mentioning something totally unrelated, another topic. And he had this thread on X or on Twitter, or whatever you want to call it. And it was about analyzing data. And it's like, well, I don't listen to that guy because of this. And he's not in my tribe, right? And that's basically what it was. He's not in my tribe. I'm going to let you know, I'm not in anybody's tribe. And I try to stay out of tribes. Okay? But that guy's not my tribe. And everything he says is suspect. And Dirty Texas Hedge was trying to explain that everyone has thoughts and opinions, but how do they analyze the data? And I retweeted it because I thought it was beautiful. And I don't know Dirty Texas Hedge personally or anything like that. We've interacted a little tiny bit, in social media, and that's just it. Just replies and likes, and he'll like something. That's it. But regardless, he mentioned, which is the mark of a pro analyst. And I don't mean a financial Wall Street analyst. I mean just somebody who analyzes data. That's not him. That's me saying that. So let me just re-quote him again. He said, which is the mark of a pro analyst. No one who follows anything closely doesn't have or develops strong opinions about how things should be. But a pro is conscious of explicitly separating evidence and conclusion so the audience can make different conclusions if they want. And that's always how I've tried to approach anything that I mention in the social media sphere. Do I have thoughts and opinions? Absolutely. But I just try to separate, okay, what's reality? What's real? What's not? What's a myth? That could be true. That might not be true. Let's approach this with reason, rationality, and balance. As a matter of fact, that's how the YouTube channel got its name, right? The aileron, that's the part of the airplane that helps keep the airplane stable. It's one of the pieces, one of the many pieces of an airplane that keeps an aircraft stable, is the aileron. And so I'm trading, but I like to stay balanced, right? So aileron trading, that's how that got there. But that's basically how I approach things. And we'll be talking about a lot of financial topics and how to think about how this is framed. How do you think about this podcast? You thinking about getting into this podcast, how would you think about it? Think about it this way. I'm not going to tell people to become a trader. I've sort of done a 180 there. I honestly tell people, hey, I'm thinking about becoming a trader. And I think of that meme that's out there. You sure about that? You sure about that? You really think you want to be a trader? You sure about that? That may not be the best decision. I actually may be the guy as a financial trader that warns you off away from trading. Maybe you don't want to do that. However, I have discovered that people like getting our input, and finance does impact all of our lives. So more in a personal way. How do the topics we see that are out there in the news about finance, what's the reality of the situation? Because that's something I did in the previous iteration when I was in sort of the public space, is talked about the reality of situations. Things get mentioned that are just complete nonsense. I think about the outcry against high-frequency trading at HFT some time ago. There are legitimate problems. I have friends of mine that were severely impacted by things that I won't say HFT brought about. I will say true black swans that nobody could see or had thought about arising happened, and it negatively impacted them. But much of the controversy that you heard was nonsense. And I would spell out, this is the way things actually work. You're hearing this in the popular news. That's not true, and I can prove it because look at XYZ. There are topics that just affect us all, the economy overall. And that's sort of what we're going to talk about, because finance and the economy does affect us all. And I come at it from the viewpoint and the perspective of a financial trader. And I have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience around different arenas in finance. As a matter of fact, even in finance, that's what makes me somewhat unique, is I have my foot in a few different worlds and always have. And so I have a very broad perspective. But I will have friends of mine that come to me, and again, just thinking about the way to frame this podcast, and they'll ask me like, okay, I don't know anything about investing, and I've got a question. And I tell them, I'm not going to be your financial investor, but here are some things, or advisor, I should say. I'm not going to be your financial advisor. I'm not. Here's how I would think about it, and here's some things to think about, and here's what this guy over here is doing. And he is advising people that way. And if I was in your shoes, I'd probably listen to him. See that guy over there? That guy over there. Go talk to that guy over there. Don't come talk to me. Go talk to that guy over there. And you can ask friends that know me in real life. I actually do that. But financial traders are a stubborn lot. We are a funny lot. And people like getting our thoughts, our opinions on things, how finance impacts us all. I know you know your way around money per se. That's a loaded statement that I can get into, and we will get into in the future. That is a real loaded statement. So they'll come to me with questions, or they'll be interested in my observations, and really in more of a general way. Like if you were one of my friends coming to me and asking a question, I'm not going to get into, well, you know what you could do? You could lock down both sides of it so there's no gamma risk. Sell the premium, you're long and short, grab the premium, then grab the yield, and then try to keep the... I'm not going to do that stuff. Okay, I'm not going to do that stuff. But of course, that's capital intensive over there. So if you use it over here and then you get into swaps, not going to do that. Not going to do that right. Friends in my real life come to me with more general questions, or they're interested in my observations, and I always tell every one of them, I'm not giving you advice. This is just the way I think about it, okay? Think about this podcast in that way. Think about this podcast in that way, okay? Like, one of the topics I know I already have lined up is advice to young people. And it is advice, but it's more life advice. It's not financial advice. Just thoughts to young people from a Generation X guy. I'm Generation X. About finance and moving your life forward, and not trading, finance, like your personal finances. And what's my take as a financial trader when it comes to that? I have some thoughts. That's a topic that's lined up. That's not getting into strategies or any of that, because I'm set. I'm fine. I'm doing my own thing, right? I'm in a few different structures. But it's more just generally my thoughts on how finance affects all of us. Okay? So, some of you guys, though, as we wrap this up, may be interested in other ventures that I have. And I'm not gonna advertise any of my institutional efforts or anything like that. But some of you guys are like, but I really liked how you approached trading and the reasonable, rational, way that you approached trading and explaining trading and the things to think about for new and aspiring traders. Like, I'm sorry, Dan, I want to be a trader, to which I will say, as we conclude this podcast, are you sure about that? Do you know what you're in for? Do you really know what you're stepping into? You may want to rethink that life choice, because you're going to probably have a moment in the future where you're rethinking your life choices if you're becoming a trader. I was rolling at our academy recently, and there's a combative belt next to us, and we're all rolling, and he was with the line. And I looked at the guy, I was like, are you rethinking your life choices yet? That trading can be that way. You can get caught in a chimera, and it's like, you rethinking your life choices at this point? So I will warn folks off. However, I realize that there are people that are just stubborn, that have the trader build, that are like me. I am stubborn. People ask, how did you make it in trading? You want to know how I made it? I am one stubborn son of a gun. Probably to the point of insanity. I had a business partner tell me, as we were trying to develop something very simple on a quantitative thesis, which I'm much more into now, just the thesis of the project, right? And I wasn't let go of it, and I just was having problems, and it went on for a long time. And my business partner looked at me and said, I used to think I was stubborn. I think I've met my match. But regardless, I'm not the only one. There are many of us that are just stupid, stubborn about trading, and that's who we are, and that's what we want. And I want to learn, I want to listen to a guy that does it. I want to look over his shoulder. In that venue, I'm still not going to give you advice. However, people always love to look over the shoulder. Well, I have a separate venture for that. I now have a brand that is placed within a corporate structure of companies. So the brand is GTC Traders, like the order type. If you are stubborn, if you're not going to give up, if you're not going to listen to me as I try to warn you away from trading, it's like, no, I'm going to be a trader. All right. Well, we have a venue for that. I am leading a project of a brand for a company called GTC Traders. So that GTC Traders, like the order type, good till canceled, GTC Traders. And that's what our thoughts are. They're always adaptable, like the order type. Our thoughts are good until they're canceled, or GTC. If you're really interested in that and looking over our shoulder, that's still not advice. We have that brand out there, GTC Traders. It's in a separate portion of the company. Actually, I'm looking to see if that company will host this podcast. So that company actually may look into hosting this particular podcast and be sort of a host for it, although it's not a part of it. And I'm going to look into that. You may see us sort of show up in association there. But I do have that as a separate project. If you are one of those stubborn people and it's like, no, I've been banging my head against the wall and I want to do this. I want to be a trader. Okay, well, though I have GTC traders, and that allows ones to look over our shoulders. That's not this, though. Okay, that's GTC traders. You can do a search for us. You'll find us. That's generally what all my Twitter interactions and all of that's under. So that's one way to support. GTC traders has a couple of premium products that allow ones to look over my shoulder. One's just what our positions are, and then the higher tier is more the quantitative thoughts, reasons, and rationales behind it. Even though I walk a very fine line there, I can't violate NDAs, but I probably have 30 to 50 different gray box quantitative programs, and they're gray box programs. So I can, and they're mine. They don't belong to a firm. So I can talk about them, right? I'm not under an NDA. I'm not under a non-compete. I'm not soliciting for clients. All of the institutions I have, you can't find a website. The private relationships and structures I'm in, you can't find them, and that's for regulatory reasons, right? So I'm not soliciting anything. But if you want to look over our shoulder, that's there, and there's a couple of tiers to it. I'm even going to improve the way we're doing things there, I think. So that's there. But this right here is just a podcast that is gonna show you how a financial trader and what he thinks is going on. Don't expect me to get too in depth or complex. The point of this podcast is the opposite of that. And as a matter of fact, good trading, for those of us that are traders, is about keeping things simple. You can ask business partners. When I left my very first project, I wanted to overcomplicate it to death. I swear, my partner literally was like beating me over the head, nearly with a baseball bat. Like, dude, stop it. Like, you are doing, and it's like, I know, I'm doing the very thing that I warned other people against. Well, why was I doing that? Because humans are naturally, I think as an entire species, we're engineers. And we think if we make it more complicated and engineer it just to the nth degree, that it'll be better. And that's exactly what you should not do in trading. So trading should be very simple. And that's what you're going to find here, only in a more general way. Only even in a more general way is just our thoughts. Like the next one, the next particular topic is thoughts from a trader that's Gen X to folks who are younger. And the lessons I've learned in life in a very general way about approaching finances. And you know who I think? I think you should go listen to that guy over there. If you don't want to be a trader, go listen to that guy. That'll be the next podcast, though. And that has just been our introduction. Our introductory first podcast for You Know a Trader. Still got to find out how this thing's going to get hosted. If you're listening to this, I must have figured it out. But that has been the very first podcast. And we will continue on. And that's just been my thoughts, not another company's thoughts, not a brand's thoughts, not a corporate structure, not a single family office, not the trust thoughts, just my thoughts, just my own personal thoughts. And that's what this always is. It's just been my thoughts, not yours, for whatever the heck day it is. As always, stay safe, trade well, and remember that love doesn't cost a dime.
My friend, I long to see you on the other side. I long to see you